Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new session of IAA Mondays. This is the first one we do in English, so very happy with that. And today, I couldn't be happier and more honored to have Thomas Koster with us, who is very well known at international scale for being a visionary and a pioneer on purpose marketing. And today, he comes to challenge us specifically on that, on purpose, especially these days that brands compete themselves with messages on sustainability, equality, diversity. What if brands are overusing this type of messages? What if consumers are starting to perceive that all that amount of messages are not that authentic? So Thomas is going to help us to navigate these questions, and he's going to make us think how to grow in a meaningful way from now onwards. And before giving the floor to Thomas, let me just share with you a bit more of his background. Thomas Koster is a front runner and one of the most recognized thinkers globally where marketing, business, and sustainability meet. He continuously challenges the status quo with his vocal and often provocative views on values, purpose, and leadership. He has written 2 books, Good Advertising and The Hero Trap, and has delivered keynotes, conferences, and workshops in more than 70 countries for clients like Facebook, Procter & Gamble, and Ikea. He has also judged top awards in the role of jury president at the DNAD Awards and a jury at Cannes Lions. Thomas, it is a real pleasure to have you here. And just telling the audience that they can send their messages in the chat box. They can send it in English or in Spanish as they wish. If it's in Spanish, we will translate it for Thomas and do it along the presentation, and we will pass it on to him at the end of his speech. Thomas, really looking forward to listening to you, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Olga, and so sorry for being the one that has to break the Spanish rule. My Spanish is not good. I can order cerveza, and that's about it. And so that would be a very, very short keynote for you here today. And also very pleased that the IAA hosts a conversation around purpose and sustainability, because I do believe that it is one of the most important topics these days to discuss. Because if you think about it, this is very much about protecting and building brands that people love. And quite often when we see brands failing these days, when they end up on the front page of the news, it is often because they don't get the diversity agenda right, because they don't get the environmental sustainability agenda right. So what I'm going to share with you today is a bit of my journey, because I used to be a very, very big believer in purpose and have championed purpose for more than a decade. And a couple of years ago, I had to challenge my own beliefs in purpose, and I had to write a new book called The Hero Trap. And I'm going to share the reasoning behind that, but also why this is important. Because in fact, what is the business case behind all of this? And how do we build brands that are authentic, that people ultimately believe in? So hopefully these are some of the questions that you can get answered. And please do ask questions, Spanish, English, and I'll get back to those at the very end. And I did agree with Olga and the team that we will be finishing before Spanish lunch. We don't want to make you grumpy, so we'll definitely be finished before 2 o'clock. But anyways, for the most part, purpose is a little bit like Pokemon. Everybody is searching for it, but nobody knows why. But when I started my career, I came from the creative side of the advertising business. I started out as a young, aspiring copywriter. And it's almost like the purpose found me, in the sense that I'm a Dane, and obviously more than a decade ago, we were hosting the Climate Summit in Copenhagen, the one that just happened in Glasgow when it was number 26. We were hosting number 15, and back then I had very high hopes to elected government leaders. Barack Obama was there, Tony Blair was there, Angela Merkel. So I thought, yeah, our elected government leaders are going to solve this. But as we all know, not much happened. And I think that provoked me to ask some serious questions. What is the role of our industry in all of this? How can I, as a marketeer, use my voice and my work to influence, to create change? So that led me to create and write my first book called Good Advertising. And as you can see, slightly younger Thomas there on the image. And maybe it was naive at the time, but this was a time, and it might sound ridiculous today, but back then purpose wasn't on anybody's lips, really. It was very niche. There wasn't a lot of brands who were entering into this space. This was the very beginning of Unilever's sustainable living plan. It was brands like Dove standing up for real beauty. It was Patagonia. It was Ben and Jerry's. So I spent a lot of time researching for this book and showcasing great examples of what purposeful communication could do. How that in fact could differentiate yourself. And I think if we go back to that time, I think we can all remember when Keith Weed was part of Unilever, and he obviously talked about the business case behind purpose. The fact that the purposeful brands grew twice as fast and at that time delivered half of the revenue to Unilever. That was back then. Today, it's a different market. And I think we are actually seeing what I would call an emerging post-purpose market, because if we think about how the market looks today, it looks a little bit like this. Every brand, and Olga talked about this as well, every brand is super busy showcasing all the great they're doing. Look at us, see what we're doing for ocean plastics. Look at us, see how we're charging towards carbon neutrality. And that doesn't look good, does it? Because then who to believe? Because when you enter a supermarket chain and you sort of feel like every brand is pitching itself as Mother Teresa or Jesus, how to navigate it, how to really stick out in the marketplace. So it's maybe not so strange that people are beginning to question what we're doing. And if we're actually thinking about what brands are doing, it almost seems like we moved from talking about how great our products were to talking about how great our companies are in the world. And at some point, that strategy is going to fail. And that's also why I had to call my book The Hero Trap. Because, if I kicked open the door to a bar and I said, hey, wait a moment, I'm the greatest lover, I'm sure at some point, somebody is going to figure out that I'm not. And if we listen to a lot of the language in this space, take Patagonia. Patagonia say, we are in the business to save our home planet. Wow, really? That is a pretty bold, ambitious, but also sort of navel-gazing statement, right? If you take most purposeful brands and you set them in front of a psychologist, I'm sure that he would say that either that brand would be suffering from megalomaniac or delusion or being delusional. Because if we take these words seriously, Patagonia, what are they doing? They're producing t-shirts to people who are stuck in a small one-bedroom apartment in Madrid. And they're saving the world? Really? What about Ben and Jerry's? And I think that's a sort of language that people are beginning to question. And I'm not saying that Patagonia aren't getting away with this, because they are one of the legacy brands out there that can get away with this strategy. But for most brands, and probably the brands that you're working for, the ones that you are supposed to protect, build, and nurture, will this strategy work? I'm doubting it will. And I'll show you why I'm seeing that this strategy isn't working as it used to. Because it does seem like the more brands are talking about the world bettering claims, unfortunately, it does seem that the response from people are, we don't believe you, scrutinizing you, believing that you're only in the business for your own self-interest. You know, selling soft drinks and talking about climate, not because you care about the climate maybe, but they'll probably challenge you and say, hey, maybe you do it to sell more soft drinks. And what is the business case, in fact, of all of this, which is also important? Because these are some numbers from an organization called Sustainable Brands. I'm sure that you have similar numbers in Spain, probably actually slightly higher at this point. But 65% of people say they actually want to buy from purposeful brands, but only 26% follow through. So that's a potential of 39%. If you figure out how to bridge that intent to action gap, that's interesting. This is where it becomes meat on the bone. But maybe it's not so strange that we say one thing and we do another thing. I think take your New Year's resolutions, right? Every new year, I don't know if you do it, but every new year, a lot of people come out there and they say, oh, I want to become healthy. I want to lose weight. I wanted to spend more time with the family. And yet just a little bit into New Year's or into January, most of those New Year's resolutions end up being a new beginning to bad old habits. So those running shoes are still lying there in the corridor. So I was observing this. I was observing that brands weren't as successful as cutting through the noise and creating believable conversations around climate, around diversity. And one of the things that sparked my latest book, The Hero Trap, was also, in fact, my own inability to create change in my own life. So I sort of had to revise my beliefs and purpose. And I started interviewing a lot of CEOs, marketing directors, looking at brands. And one of the brands that I came across was, in fact, a brand that answered a pivotal question in my life that I also want to ask all of you. Think about what leader, brand, or organization have in fact created real change in your life and maybe shifted your mindset, changed your behaviors. Think about that. Because with all these purpose leaders out there, with all these brands claiming to create change, how many have actually succeeded creating change in your life? One of the brands I started looking to was a brand that have created change in my life. It was part of one of my New Year's resolutions, in fact, and it's a brand called Årstiderne, which it's Danish, so a bit of introduction there to Danish. So now you can say Årstiderne, which means seasons in Danish. So, and I can say cerveza in Spanish. But what Årstiderne does is basically they deliver a box of farm fresh produce to your doorstep. But moreover, and I'm sure you have similar services in Spain, but moreover, it also comes with the recipes. And so suddenly I could learn how to cook more plant-based because I felt bad about always being stuck in an airplane, burning all fossil fuels. So this is my way of contributing a little bit to the climate, of doing something that I love, cooking. And I know that, sorry for having stolen the world's best restaurant for you in Spain, but obviously Nordic Kitchen have been quite rewarded these last couple of years. But I promise you, when I was a kid, that wasn't the case. When I grew up, it was overboiled potatoes, fat gravy. It was sort of like pork meat that was sort of hard as the sole of a shoe. It wasn't an interesting kitchen. So I really needed to catch up on my kitchen skills. And when I interviewed the CEO of Årstiderne, what he said to me was that they believed in something that they called Earth Connection. It wasn't something that was preachy. It wasn't a belief that I had to buy into. Earth Connection was something I had to find for myself, this connection with the produce, the vegetables, the earth. And the CEO shared with me this eye-opening moment when people for the first time, for example, cut open a beetroot and their hands are colored red. That sort of love, that sort of personal journey. And obviously, when I go on that journey and I'm successful and I put a beautiful vegan pie in the oven, I share it. Nobody has to tell me to share it on social media. I share it on my Instagram account, obviously, showcasing my values and my belief and my accomplishments to the whole world. Obviously, the reality is probably looking a little bit more like this, though. So what I've been witnessing over this more than a decade working in this market is a change from where people aren't buying your values, your navel-gazing why, or your actions, but in fact, who you can help them become. So I think we're quickly approaching, in some markets, especially in the Nordics, very much so, a move from a purposeful market to a post-purpose market. Because if we look at what people essentially are buying, we've seen how we've marketed products and functional benefits and emotional benefits. And with my first book, Good Advertising, we started talking about the societal benefits. But obviously, when you add sustainability, diverse, etc., to every product, it starts losing its meaning. It's sort of become what long-lasting taste was to chewing gums in the 90s. It's just marketing lingo. It doesn't really mean anything. But what becomes interesting is when you deliver a transformational difference, because this is when I can feel you create change in my life. When you as a brand have made me less biased, have helped me live a healthier life, have taught me new skills in the kitchen, so I now can create amazing plant-based food. So this is about the feeling that I get. This is not a marketing claim. This is a change. And it's also a fundamentally different way of building brand leadership. Moving from the sort of leadership that we saw from Patagonia, where they say, believe in us as an organization to bring about change, to really saying to people to believe in themselves. So for me, this is very much about leadership. Ask yourself, what has been the best leaders in your life? For me, it's very often been women, in fact. Because leadership is changing from this is my value, this is my vision, to actually enabling people and helping them on the journey. There's nothing worse than a boss that just comes there and hands over some papers and says, do this. But we like the boss who is like, what are your ideas? How can we make this company better? How can we create a marketing campaign that interests people? So I wanted to create and change the way that we build brands. And because this is about change, I look to two disciplines, psychotherapy and coaching, because both of those disciplines are goal-oriented. So today I'm going to share a tool with you that's called the Arrow. And the Arrow fundamentally changes the way that you build brands. And the Arrow asks 4 questions that is helping you on your journey towards I call a transformative brand, a brand that creates change, creates action. It's about your values. The first question is, and this shouldn't be too hard for you to answer, but what is it that you do? If we take, for example, Nike as an example, that is their running shoes, the sports equipment. Or if it's Apple, it might be the computers. It's never necessarily fixed, because they're also into music. The second question is, how are you unique in delivering your product or service? Maybe it's because it's from Spain. Maybe it's because it's the most convenient. Whatever it might be, those might be your more typical USPs, your unique selling propositions. The interesting question is here, the shift from the navel-gazing why to the who. So who can you help people become? This is about figuring out a meaningful role that you can play in people's lives. How can you help them? What can you learn them? What is their journey? What are those New Year's resolutions that we're all battling with? Might become healthier. We might struggle with understanding finance. There's so many things that all of us as human beings are trying to improve in our daily lives. And this is where brands become meaningful. Not by claiming some big world-saving mission, but the small stuff. Because it's the small stuff that really does change the world, one small step at a time. So maybe it's making people greener. Or maybe it's, as Ikea is doing at the moment, pledging 1 billion people to live more sustainably. These are the sort of concrete actions and promises from companies that inspired me when I interviewed so many different brands and leaders in the book, The Hero Trap. The last question is, when do you enable this change? Because change without a deadline is often not successful. For IKEA, it's an everyday battle. It's trying to get 1 billion people to live more sustainably every day. Might also be a situation, a time of day, or it might just be an encouragement, an active encouragement. I'll give you an example. So the outcome of this, I call a transformative promise. It is sort of a purpose, but I call it a transformative promise because it's a promise about a change that you can enable in people's lives. And let me give you an example of a company who does that. So Discovery is a health insurance company. They are present in 7 markets across the world. And their transformative promise is to incentivize people to live healthier, incentivizing people to live healthier. And they've been awarded as one of the most innovative health insurance companies by having a very simple, concrete promise towards people. And they have a program called Vitality. It's basically a classic reward program, but they reward every healthier behavior their customers are doing. So let's say that, Olga goes down to the supermarket and she buys fruits and vegetables. She gets rewarded. Or one of the other ones are maybe going to the gym. You get rewarded. By having such a laser sharp focus on their customers' path towards a healthier life, they've been very successful. They've done a big survey with more than 200,000 people. And the people who take part in the Vitality program exercise 5.2 days more per month. Think about that, 5.2 days more per month. I would be happy if I started running 5.2 days more per month. It's really a massive achievement. It really also shows that you can bridge that gap of the 65% and 29%, that 39% gap. And also what's more interesting is the alignment of purpose and profit. This is a discussion that I think we've had for a number of years, because often it ends up being a two-headed, what I call a two-headed purpose monster. One head is saying, oh, let's be nice, let's do the right thing for people and planet. And the other one is saying, earn more money, capture more market shares. What Discovery has done is they aligned the two, because healthier customers means a better bottom line and less payout in premiums. So obviously, I was even more curious to figure out how we work with this in marketing as well, not just in the leadership, but also in the way that we shape our commercials. So I commissioned a study, and we're actually expanding this study with GfK. Those results will be out end of May. So if you want to know more about that, do feel free to write or ping me. But this was the first study we did, a much smaller study, only 4 brands, 4 purposeful brands and 4 transformative brands. This is an example of one of the purposeful brands from Budweiser that aired this commercial during Super Bowl and talking about this better is for a better tomorrow. So quite classic purpose lingo. And obviously they wanted to share how they today are either investing in renewable energy or are offsetting the brewing of beer. But let's compare that to another commercial that you might have seen. It's quite a famous one from Always. And what Always wanted to do was obviously to build confidence in these girls becoming women. And they, in this campaign, what they wanted to change was, in fact, the connotations, the how people perceive the sentence "like a girl." I'm sure this translates similarly into Spanish, because when you say that you run like a girl, it means you don't run as fast as the boys. You're not doing it as strongly, as forceful as the boys. They wanted to change that and make it a sentence of pride. And they were incredibly successful doing that. When we compare the data from the 4 purposeful commercials with the 4 transformative commercials, it's really interesting to see that on brand warmth, the commercials are doing more or less the same. This is the sort of fuzzy feeling you get in your stomach by watching the ads. And obviously, all 8 commercials have been extremely high investment commercials. Most of them are aired at Super Bowl. When we look at competence, it's also quite interesting, because if you think about it, in the transformative approach, the brand doesn't talk about itself. And yet still, it rates as highly. I kind of feel like it's the same as with real estate agents. I don't know how you feel about real estate agents. I'm not a big fan. What tends to happen with real estate agents, you have this real estate agent who says, you know what, we've sold hundreds of apartments all over Madrid. Trust us, we're competent. And then you have the real estate agent who looks more to your thoughts and why you're selling and all that stuff, and might arrive at your house and sit down, drink a cup of coffee and say, you know what, Thomas, why are you moving? And what do you like about this neighborhood? What don't you like about this neighborhood? And I would say that that is a pretty competent real estate agent, right? But the biggest difference is, in fact, when we look to how motivated people feel by the transformative commercials. And this is, in fact, interesting, because there is a 29.6% difference. So people feel 29.6% more motivated by the transformative commercials. And what's even more interesting is that people are on average 29.4% willing to pay a premium price. For me, that says something about playing a meaningful role in people's lives. Something that I think is extremely important that we figure out. What role are you playing? What are you helping people with? And I think this is where we as marketeers and brand builders really need to think hard about the role that we want to take in people's lives. Because these days, and I think especially, we're not even finished with the pandemic just yet, but I think the pandemic has taught us one important thing, that the best things in life aren't things. This is about community, about health, about all these things that make us happy. And we've seen people picking up so many new hobbies, or going back to old hobbies, things that they like to do. And these are all things that you as a brand can help enable, can help push people towards. Like Austin, who cooked me, or who taught me to, cook more plant-based. So maybe people are falling out of love with brands, not because they're not standing up and solving society's challenges, but because you don't have a role to play. You're not adding to people's lives. And I think brick and mortar stores are a really significant example of this, because across the world, we are seeing physical stores not performing as well. People are buying things online. But why shouldn't they? Because what purpose does a store essentially serve today? I can buy it online. I can probably even get it cheaper online. And the only thing you see in a store is almost like just a showcase of products. But again here, how can you there make a meaningful difference in people's lives? Let me give you an example from Ikea. Ikea is obviously famously known for breaking up couples. Haven't we all been in a IKEA store and gotten into an argument with our loved ones? But what IKEA have done this time is that they've put behind them the labyrinth-like model and created a small store. And this is actually from a neighborhood in Copenhagen. They are scaling this initiative up across many other markets. But it's a small store, and you go in there, and behind the screen are sitting designers who are helping you design your dream home. They're helping you on your journey towards that homey, nice, comforting feeling. I'll give you another example of a transformative brand. And this was a really interesting conversation I had with Marcelo, the CEO. Because I don't know how you feel about it when you have to learn to, let's say, play paddle or play tennis, and you go into a traditional sports retailer and you're always met by this super fit man or woman, and you already feel a little bit intimidated. And so that's exactly what Marcelo, he saw, that for the most part, it's always about athleticism, about being the best. But most of us don't do sports because we want to be the best. So Respect Your Universe is a Canadian sports retailer who's also now present in the US. And their transformative promise is to help you, no matter what your goals are in life or in sports. And it's so incredible to go into one of their stores and see average Americans and Canadians behind the counter. You're not feeling intimidated, quite the opposite. And Marcelo read aloud in my conversation with him some of the feedback, some of the emails he got from clients, from a woman who had just absolutely thankful that now she felt motivated to go on a small stroll around the park. It's that battle that for some might be a marathon, and for her obviously gives and brings a lot of value. And what they also have done is that they changed the concept of what a retail space needs to be and turned it into sort of a community place. So, for example, if any one of you on this call are passionate about, let's say, yoga, you can invite people from your community into the store. And if enough people sign up, you can borrow the space for free. And also one of the things they've done, which I think is very clever from marketing point of view and service extension point of view, is that, let's say your goal was to lose weight and you're successful. And now you can't fit the gym pants that you so lovingly bought in Respect Your Universe store. Now you can go in there and you can change them for free. So I talked about challenging your role as a brand in people's lives and really taking a think about how you can help people on their journey, on their values. But another thing we need to talk about is also how we change the way that we create marketing. Because to be honest, we don't have much of a say today. This guy is in charge. We're all in charge. Think about the immense amount of baby photos and pet photos and cat photos that are uploaded. Today, people are the biggest marketeers on the planet. And we need to realize that, because what we're doing right now is desperate. We're trying to hold on to a power that we don't have anymore. So I want to fundamentally shift your mindset on this as well. For those of you who have teenage daughters or sons, you've seen this, right? It's nothing more embarrassing than when mom and dad keep showing up to like the teenage son's soccer match, hugging too long. That's what we do with customers. But we need to let them go and respect their creativity, their individuality, and turn them into co-creators, co-makers of the marketing. Because there's nothing worse than just having somebody targeting campaigns at you. This is about time we give people a choice. Because think about it, the young generation today grew up in a completely different world. They can, with the click of a button, create their own product, order their own stuff, customize their own stuff. So think about how you can open up for people's creativity across the whole marketing mix. So in the middle, you have your transformative promise, the meaningful role you want to play in people's lives. But onwards, and this is what I call the wheel, the further out you go, the more power, decision, the more of a say you give to people. And you open up for their creativity and passion. And it's so incredible to see what happens when you do that, when you move from a we create everything as a brand perspective, you do your market surveys, you come out with a new Coke with a vanilla flavor, and instead are turning to people to say, you decide when you want it, how you want it. Let me give you a good example from a service and product innovation. So back in the days when you rented a car, if I was here in Copenhagen, I would have to jump up on a bicycle. I would have to bicycle down to Avis or Budget or whoever it was, wait in line, get the paperwork done, sign the contract, pick up the car, all that stuff. It was just cumbersome and really on the rental agency's premises. But today, thanks to an innovation by BMW, there's a program called Drive Now, and I'm sure you have that in Spain as well, where you can easily, with your iPhone, pick up a car from wherever and you can leave it wherever by the ease of a button. So this is where you distribute your product wherever people want on their terms. I'll give an example from campaigns. Because quite often when you turn people's passion into the driver and the engine of your marketing efforts, everything changes. There's a company called REI, which is sort of like an outdoor retailer. So they sell equipment like Patagonia. It's for people who love the outdoors. And on Black Friday, the biggest shopping day of the year, one of the biggest anyways, they say to people, don't go and shop, go outside, enjoy the outdoors. And people absolutely love this. And they became ambassadors for this movement. And they love to share their outdoor photos. And it's incredible to see how that has fundamentally spread very, very fast, because now it's not just about your marketing euros. This is really about turning people into the ambassadors for your cause. So from a very short period, from 2015 to 2018, it's more than 10 times the amount of people taking part. And from a day you could barely see in the national parks in the US, it's now one of the most visited days in the state parks. Again, bridging that little gap of 39% and playing a meaningful role in people's lives. And each and every time I interviewed these leaders and saw those cases from brands, it was incredibly inspiring, because it wasn't empty words or too good to be true promises about world bettering things that your brand is or might be doing. It wasn't about this mindset of in 2030, 2050, we're going to do this and that. It was about real tangible change that people could feel and they wanted to take part in. Like this tweet that I found, where it's a mother who shares the story of how her 12-year-old daughter teased her dad and older brother that if he could just run like a girl, they would have run a little faster. It's things like that that is inspiring, where it's not an empty purpose statement, but it's a real felt promise. And isn't that what leadership is in fact about? For me, leadership is really no greater than what you can make people achieve. And this is the real time to create change. This is a real time to create brands that people trust, that people love. But also, furthermore, we are faced with a much, much bigger challenge. Obviously, the social challenges, the environmental challenges that we're seeing at such a rapid speed. Every day in the news, we read these stories. Just today, I read how today again, the water reservoirs in California are getting critically low, jeopardizing the water resources for ordinary citizens in California, jeopardizing the agriculture, the food that we are also dependent on. So there is an urgent call for understanding how we get people to act on things that are important in their lives. And for those of you who are experienced sustainability people, who have worked with this for a number of years, also know that a lot of this now moves from being what you can do inside the company to obviously understanding how you can change the impact of your products and services in the hands of consumers. Third tier, this idea that yes, one thing is making the washing powder, but actually the damage from that washing powder happens in the hands of consumers because of water usage, because of electricity. So we all need to act together. But change is difficult. And remember, I wrote this book about change because it was so incredibly difficult to create change in my own life. And for those of you who have smoked and know smokers, it's difficult to create change, right? I mean, your loved ones can tell you to quit those cigarettes. Your children might tell you to quit those cigarettes. Your doctor, or maybe they even try to put those horrific images of lungs on the packaging, on the cigarette packaging, which kind of just does that you avoid that. But the only one who can, in fact, create that much needed change is you. So know that I started with quite a provocative image of Jesus, but let me end with one as well, because ultimately, if you want to change the world, you have to begin with yourself. So building brands with purpose today is not an easy task. I'll encourage you to think about how you can look at the arrow and not end up being a navel-gazing saint on a crusade, but actually think about how you can bring me and everyone else on board this journey. So don't pitch yourself as a hero. You will ultimately fail. But think about how you can turn each and everyone into the heroes of our own lives, because then I think we're going to succeed and we're going to build brands that people love. So this was a bit what I had to share with you here today. And for those of you who are interested more in my book, you can scan this little QR code by taking your phone up to the screen, and it will lead you to the website where you can download a little summary of my latest book and get an introduction to, for example, the arrow and the wheel that I shared with you in the presentation here today. So hold up your phone and do that. And I'll also encourage you to follow my journey going further, because without all of you, I won't succeed. My mission has been and always has been about being a catalyst for other people's positive change. So really do hope that you want to follow me on a channel of your choice. So sorry for me not being able to speak Spanish here today, but you learned a Danish word, årstiderne, and I hope that you have some further questions to me, because obviously we're on the same journey here today. So excited to hear some questions from you.
Thomas, thank you so much. Okay, it's been really, really inspiring. I loved it. And there are several questions. Okay, so we are gonna pass you the first one on to you really, really soon. There it
Perfect.
is.
There we have it. What are we doing wrong if only 26% finally buy those purpose-driven brands? And that is from an anonymous LinkedIn user here. Thank you so much for that question. For me, it's been one of the things that I've, through my whole career, obviously wanted to understand, because I think it is really about the change, and it is really about how we build brands that people want to engage with. Because I think when that number is so low, we're not successful. We're not doing the right thing. I think there's a couple of things that I found out doing the research, and why we're also embarking on a bigger research now with GfK. And one is how we build the brand and the message. So don't talk about your own accomplishments, but talk about the role that you play in people's lives, what I can do as an individual. I think that is key to getting people more engaged. Then I would say that right now, as the market is, there is, in a lot of categories, much more purposeful brands, which makes it much more difficult, in fact, to own that as an extremely differentiating position. I mean, if you think about Dove a decade ago, the thought leadership that they created around real beauty and how they changed the narrative, it's amazing. But today, that is sort of standard in the marketing space. I mean, probably the issue is if you don't do it, that's when you're going to get into trouble. So that, I think, is also a big reason for that. And then I think historically, lastly, I think it has been the case that typically purposeful brands or more sustainable brands were often seen as a price premium. This is something that I know Ikea and others have been fighting with. Today, again, that I think this is something that I see changing. I mean, for example, in Denmark right now, we are have the highest number of citizens who buy organic. So organic has, in fact, become the category that people choose over conventional farm produce. So I do see the change also there happening. So thanks for that question. Let's see if we have another second interesting question. So let me read this aloud as well. But how can we change the consumer's behavior if we are getting tired of the greenwashing that we see, all those purpose statements? For me, this is very important, because if we don't get this right, we are jeopardizing all our brands. We are jeopardizing the momentum that we have and expectations that we know people have after COP26 and the pressure that they are putting on brands and companies to help create change. So if we fail on this, we really do fail. I again see that, for example, challenger brands, smaller, more agile brands, have in fact been much better at getting market shares these days. And I think it's because they have figured it out better, but also because a lot of the big global brands that we typically have celebrated as purpose pioneers might become a little bit tired. I mean, if you think about it, take Ben and Jerry's as an example. I mean, Ben and Jerry's, when they were founded in Vermont, had a really interesting purpose. We want to bake the best possible ice cream in the nicest possible way, and that was something that they've definitely have been championing for many years. But if you look at the ice cream market today, I mean, best possible, maybe not really. I mean, it's not even organic. I have tons of ice cream makers just in my neighborhood that do it much better. If we take their words nice, is it really that nice today? I mean, I can buy again from a little local dairy producer who does amazing ice cream that supports the local community, et cetera, or I can buy it from a multinational. So I think people are getting tired of these words that today has become more meaningless because competition has become harder. So I think it's very much about being real, being genuine, and thinking about how you can help me on the journey, and never overpromise. I think the tip of the iceberg used to be the advertised story. It's all those things underneath water level that you need to be thinking very much about. So talk to your sustainability folks within the company, understand what claims you can in fact make, and also think about what does those claims matter in my life. Just because you go out and say that you're climate neutral, what does that change for me? I want to live more carbon friendly. How can you help me on that journey? So maybe that could be some of the things you can do to at least bridge that gap. And again, as I said, if you're more interested, we are, as I said, doing more research with GfK in this topic. So to write me wherever, and I'll share more of that. So I'm certain we have more questions. Or how does that look, Olga?
Yes,
Yes.
there are.
So we have a question from Jean-Ramon Plana Pujol. I hope I didn't butcher your name too much on that. So thank you much for that, Juan. Thomas, what do you think of ranking of promises fulfilled? Lovely idea. I absolutely love that idea. We should do that. As I said, I mean, I thought it was such an interesting thing that with all these suddenly purposeful brands out there, how many of them actually do create that change? And some brands have obviously been quite serious on this. If you think about the Turn to 30 campaigns that we've seen in the sort of washing detergent markets, we have seen consumer change happening there. And today that has become more and more standard that we wash it at lower washing cycles. Today, I think some of the newer washing detergents and the innovation with enzymes actually can turn it all the way down to 20, I think. So that is at least one place where I've seen those promises being fulfilled. Discovery, I think, that I shared today is another good example. But yeah, we should do that. Definitely do a ranking of how successful were you. And I think this is also an encouragement for you today when you do your campaigns. That's also why I talk about the move from purpose to a transformative promise, because a promise about a change you can enable in people's lives. And you can measure that. So whether you are from an agency or whether you work with your agencies, think about how you can add those parameters to the brief. What are the real changes that you can enable in, not just in market shares, etc., but an actual change? Because I think that becomes incredibly interesting. And I know that, for example, some of the conversations I had in the research phase with Ikea, this is something they take quite seriously in understanding how they can do that. And they've done massive surveys, for example, the UK and UK homes, to understand what are some of those behavior changes that they can help enable. For example, they've been extremely successful in pivoting people away from traditional light bulbs to LED light, which obviously has an enormous knock-on effect on electricity usage. So thanks for that, and let's do that list. And let's see if we have more questions. We have a question from Paloma Aguada. So thank you so much, Paloma, for asking this question. My question is, how do you see this applying in a B2B business? Imagine a digital solutions company. How can this type of business be purposeful and credible? Thank you, Paloma. What I think the B2B space is becoming incredibly interesting these days, and there's so much happening, and this didn't used to be earlier on. This was very much something that business to consumer brands, especially the FMCG companies, car companies, beverage companies were seeing. But today what's happening in the B2B space is, in fact, that a lot of B2B brands are obviously supplying to others. And if you are one of those suppliers to a brand who have, for example, committed to carbon neutrality, it has a knock-on effect on the whole supply chain. So this is something that I see within ingredients businesses, service providers, etc., because the climate impact is part of the overall reporting. So there is a massive transformation happening in the B2B business and massive opportunities for those B2B brands who takes this journey seriously. Digital solutions companies, it's interesting to see what's happening there, because it's been a conversation that didn't used to be there earlier, but today obviously data is very much being seen as the new oil. Obviously we have unfortunately cameras that take photos, and bigger resolutions. Our data usage is becoming more and more insane. So obviously that is one of the places. But the arrow, in fact, that I shared in the presentation does apply as much for B2B companies as it does for B2C companies. Because there are a lot of things where B2B brands, in fact, can help their customers or their customers' customers. Maybe it's, if you're a logistics company, maybe it's about giving people confidence, so the logistics manager don't have to have the stress of whether his or her package is being delivered at time. How do you do that? And maybe that is what you're selling. So I think it's again finding out how you as a company can play a meaningful role in that space, because by the end of the day, business to business is also business to human. It's about still anchoring your service offering in a human experience. So good question there, Paloma, and thank you for reminding me of the importance of the B2B business space. And we have more questions. So this is from Joachim. So great that you turned in, Joachim. So good to see some familiar faces here today as well. So Joachim has a question here. Thomas, given the transformation of the economy and society through the sustainability revolution, do you think that the bonus lateral thinking is necessary to break with logical thinking, lateral thinking versus logical thinking? Good question. I think there's a lot of systems thinking that we need to reimagine and redo and rethink. And I think we're just seeing companies beginning to scratch the surface of what is necessary. I think we've a very abundantly clear example of all of this right now is what we see with the Great Resignation. I mean, personally, I see it every day. Colleagues and others who are leaving well-paid jobs to start their own companies, to go on a world trip with their family. And so I think there's a lot that needs to be rethought today. I think my belief is very much still around what makes good life. That's why my framework is very much focused on that. Because I think if we can figure out what provides happiness, what brings meaning to our lives, I think that is where the success of business lies at. And something I realized a little bit later into the writing of the book and the research of the book was, in fact, that some of the most valuable brands in this world are, in fact, transformative brands. So if you take Apple as an example, they've always been there for the think different type mindset and trying to push us towards unhindered creativity, which they in many ways have been pioneers in creating gadgets that are so easy to use. So even a 5-year-old can now use a camera and video and being a creator. Or Nike, for that sake, has also been a company that's been extremely successful on obviously pushing us to athletic success and are also constantly trying to challenge what that means. For example, they recently launched a initiative around the mindfulness that is needed in this space, not to stress and not to make this only about the physical, but actually that the mind is an incredibly important thing to bring into competitions as well. So a lot of interesting things happening here. So, and a really interesting question to follow up on there, Joachim. But and for a much longer conversation, I think, but we don't want to tap into your lunch today. Let's see if we have time for our final question, not to mess with, well, I always love Spanish food, so I'm even getting hungry today just thinking about it. But we have an anonymous question here as well from a LinkedIn user. Thank you for that. Could you give some advice for B2B marketing companies to companies that sell services for other companies? How can we approach to be a purposeful brand? Again, I think there's two things here. First of all, it's getting your house in order. Always get your house in order. Think about how you can adopt more sustainable practices. This is the first thing, obviously, which has not only something to do with marketing, but the whole company and the whole transformation. And this is obviously incredibly important, and especially if you are to compete in this market that I say where sustainable parameters become more and more important. I mean, take packaging as an example. I mean, packaging used to be something that was traded on price, on sort of convenience and quality. And today, sustainability has become an incredibly important parameter when we talk about packaging. So we come from a product that has become that was super commoditized and generic, and packaging companies today can have extremely interesting conversations with their customers and have been able to create alliances between brands who usually were competitors around understanding how you can in fact create more sustainable packaging for people, for example, in the beverage business. Obviously with services, typically it might be traveling and other factors that have a great impact there, or for example, the use of information technology, computers, laptops, etc. That is most of typically a climate impact. But also, again, as I said, think about how you as a service provider can help your customers on their journey. And again, I think it is looking at the arrow and asking yourself that one pivotal question: who can you help you become? What is it in fact that you're helping people with? One of the things that, as I said, my mission has been over all these years have been to obviously become a catalyst for other people's positive change, and we take that quite seriously, both in having conversations as we have here today, but also in fact helping our clients understand this mindset and hopefully inspiring them to enable and create those positive parameters in the marketing, in the way that they shape the brand, but also in the way that they run their business practices.
Okay, so thank you. I mean, it's 2 o'clock, Thomas. Oh my God.
2 o'clock, exactly.
It's just perfect timing, and I mean, really, thank you for coming, for inspiring us. It's been really rewarding. I mean, I think we all have been learning, and I think we are getting many thoughts away from your conversation to think about, to design our marketing strategies as well. And what you say, to start transforming our own house as well, so that we are authentic. So thank you so much. And thank you to the audience for connecting today. Thank you for all your questions. And next IAA Monday is on 23rd of May. It's going to be with Andoni Rodriguez de Galarza. This one is Spanish. And it's going to be on sales efficiency. Okay, so we wait for you on May 23rd. Have a nice week. And Thomas, thanks again. Have a nice week in Denmark, or wherever you're traveling for. Okay?
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you so much, IA, for hosting this. Thank you, Olga. Thank you all.
Thank you.